Hi guys, today is Thursday, April 16th, and I have a little presentation to share with you. Let me start by directing you to the content folder for today. Today, you'll see there's quite a few of these now. In the control panel on the left, you want to go to where it says Thursday, April 16th, Poetry. And if you missed what we did on Tuesday, that's right above it, Tuesday, April 14th. So let me show you quickly what's in today's content folder. So we aren't going to do too many poems today, but we're going to look at two forms. So we're looking at the sestina, and you'll see on page 21 in our poetry book the section called The Sestina at a Glance. Then we're going to look at one example by Anthony Hecht. It's called The Book of Yolick. It's on page 37. Then we're going to look at another form called the pantoum. The pantoum at a glance is on page 43. And then we will look at a poem by Nellie Wong called Grandmother's Song, and that starts on page 50. Okay, so the sestina, I've put the rules in here on our Blackboard page, but I'm also going to go through them in this little presentation too. You'll see that there's a short video. It's under 3 minutes, and this person explains what happens. What happens is you'll have your first stanza, and then in the second stanza, the same end words appear, but in a different order. So this person in the video explains that. And then after that, you'll see that I've typed up the text of Anthony Hecht's poem, The Book of Yolick. And what I did was I highlighted the end words. So here's the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, the sixth one. And then the same end words appear in the second stanza, but in a different order, right? So the sixth one comes first, the first one comes second, the fifth one comes third, the second one comes fourth, the fourth one comes fifth, and the third one comes second. And then the same pattern follows in the next stanza. And then I didn't colorize all the stanzas, but it's the same pattern. You'll notice it's all the same end words: camp, to, walk, day, meal, home. Home, camp, meal, tattoo, well, to, day, walk, and so forth. And then all of the end words get used again in the last stanza, which is only 3 lines. So we'll go over that in the presentation, but I just want you to know that it's here so that you can look at it and you can see the whole text of the poem. Then this is a reading that somebody else did of the poem, The Book of Yolick. There's a little bit of background music, which it's kind of sad but very pretty music. It's a poem about someone remembering a little boy who died in the Holocaust from his own childhood. You'll see when you read the poem. All right, and then I'll explain about the pantoum. These are the rules for the pantoum, comes right from our book. And then here I provided, just for your reference, to give you a sense of how the lines get rearranged in the stanzas. So like the first stanza, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, lines 2 and 4 are going to repeat in the second stanza as lines 1 and 3. And then the second and fourth line in that stanza will be new, but then they'll repeat as the first and third lines of the next stanza. But I'll explain that in my presentation. And then I want you to see that the poem Grandmother's Song by Nellie Wong, I've typed that up and I've colorized the lines to show you where the repetitions occur. So this is the first stanza, and the second and fourth lines repeat in the following stanza as the first and the third lines, right? And then in the second stanza, the second and fourth lines repeat, in the third stanza as the first and the third lines. And that pattern follows until the end, where you'll see that the first and third lines of the first stanza, those show up at the very end in the last stanza. Okay, so I know it's all a bit confusing, but let me click over to my presentation and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here's my presentation. This is going to just take a minute. So while we're waiting for that to boot up, let's take a look at the rules for the sestina on page 21. All right, I don't know what's going on there. I guess I'll just go back to having a small screen. Okay, so there it is. All right, so the sestina at a glance. So let me get rid of all of that. It's distracting. Okay, the sestina at a glance. This is on page 21. So it's a poem of 39 lines. It has 6 stanzas of 6 lines each. This is followed by what's called an envoy, which is really just another stanza of 3 lines. That's at the very end. All of these are unrhymed, so you're not worried about a rhyme scheme. The same 6 end words must occur in every stanza, but in a changing order that follows a set pattern. Let me see if I can get my full screen. Yay! Okay, so this recurrent pattern of end words is known as lexical repetition. Each stanza must follow on the last by taking a reversed pairing of the previous lines. The first line of the second stanza must pair its end words with the last line of the first. The second line of the second stanza must do this with the first line of the first, and so on. The envoy, or the last 3 lines, must gather up and deploy the 6 end words. Okay, and then what you'll notice is in the example poem, which is by Anthony Hecht, called The Book of Yolick, and that's on page 37. Let me turn to that page in my book. Page 37. Okay, so I've provided the whole poem on Blackboard at our content folder for today, right? And you'll notice when you look at the first stanza, the end words are meal, walk, to, home, camp, and day, in that order in the first stanza. But in the second stanza, the same words show up again, but in a different order. So in the second stanza, the order is day, meal, camp, walk, home, and to. And here's how the order of end words appears in the transition to the second stanza. So the first word from the first stanza becomes the second word in the second stanza. The second word in the first stanza becomes the fourth word in the next stanza. The third word goes to the end. The fourth word is the second to the last. The fifth word ends up being the third, and the sixth word ends up being the first. So, said another way, when you get to the second stanza, if in the first stanza, if the end words are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, in the second stanza, the ordering is going to be 6, 1, 5, 2, 4, and 3, which might seem confusing, but that same pattern is going to repeat from one stanza to the next. And if you go back, when you go back over to Blackboard, to the content folder, and you see where I pasted the whole poem, I've colorized the end words so that you can see that pattern at work. All right, so I also want you to notice how there were 6 stanzas of 6 lines each, and the same end words appear in each stanza, but reordered in a lexical pattern. In the last 3 lines, what they call the envoy, the same 6 end words are used and, as our book puts it, gathered up and deployed. So I'm going to show you that right here. So here are the last 3 lines, the last stanza, which they're calling the envoy, in the book of Yolick. Prepare to receive him in your home someday. Though they killed him in the camp they sent him to, he will walk in as you're sitting down to a meal. So there are the 6 end words: home, day, camp, to, walk, and meal. And then I know that this sounds a bit confusing with these rules. It's a little bit like a puzzle or a game, but when you hear the poem read, those repetitions have a certain effect on the way you experience the poem. So when you listen to the reading of the poem, be sort of attentive to how it sounds, how those repetitions sound in the poem. All right, so let's move on to the pantoum. Okay, so the pantoum at a glance.